Sonia, Sylvia, Tara just joined us.
Oh, welcome, Tara.
Tara, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Sorry for being late.
Okay, so I think we can revert to the original order. Thanks, Tara. You're gonna lead us off after Sylvia's introduction, just so you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we have 45 participants now, so we're going to start, and we're already live on Facebook. Thank you very much for joining us all. Welcome to the European seminar, webinar on the right to say no. We have a great lineup of panelists sharing from their experiences of resistance in Europe and what they have experienced as the right to say no. They will, with this, share with us some of their strategies, the reason why their communities organized and their organizations came to life also to say no to extractivism. This webinar on the European webinar on the right to say no is part of a series of webinars launched by the Thematic Social Forum on Mining and Extractive Industries. This is a group that gathered in 2018 in South Africa on a large event that gathered movements from all across the world and from wide and large from the struggles against extractivism. And as part of the outcomes of this first gathering, one of the main results was the need to start launching a campaign that could be the umbrella for all the different phases in which people and communities resist extractives. So we have seen that it has been very difficult sometimes to compromise movements such as the just transition with when we talk about, for instance, no mining or artisanal mining, when we talk about patriarchy and the central space that the economic capitalist system plays in the existence of extractivism and in the promotion of extractivism. And on the other hand, we have seen how many communities organize themselves to resist. And with this resistance, they don't only say no to this model that has been imposed to them, but also they say yes to their alternatives. At the same time, we have seen that there are developments at international and national level on legislation, like the free, private, and full consent. During the first webinar of this series, that was the global webinar on the right to say no, at the end of August, we had a mixture of experiences from Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America. And this time we're going to concentrate on the specifics of Europe. How does the right to say no is expressed as in live in Europe? What are the different strategies, the different dimensions of it? And some of the actors are the people who are kindly enough to share today with us their experiences. I'm gonna let Marta Conde introduce them in a minute. So I'm just gonna introduce myself quickly and the organizing team of the webinar. My name is Silvia Obregon. I am the Corporate Regulation and Extractives Officer of CIDSE. I have been organizing this webinar alongside with Marta Conde from the Autonomous University of Barcelona and Hal Rhodes from the Gaia Foundation. And we, as several of the panelists, are part of this movement linked to the Thematic Social Forum on Mining and Extractive Industries. And we welcome all of you watching and joining us from all around the world to join this campaign and to help us strategize. The idea or the objective is that at the end of these presentations and the series of webinars that are going to go from the global webinar to 4 regional webinars and maybe 1 additional ad hoc webinar on a specific aspect of gender or the impacts on gender of extractivism and the struggles that are linked to the gender approach, and a final webinar that will gather all the learnings of this conversation at global level. So we hope that several of you follow through the end and that some of you have already joined from the beginning, and to have a very interactive webinar this time. Let me remind you that there is interpretation available you will find the different options to activate it in the bottom of your screen, where you find participants, Q&A. Hal would be happy to gather your questions, so please do not be shy. We have some polls, chats, as well as the interpretation channel. So we have interpretation in Spanish and in French available for you. I'll give the floor now to Marta to introduce the panelists and the rest of the content of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Silvia, for this introduction. I'm going to introduce now our panelists. Before, I want to say, if you have any questions, please, or comments, please use the chat or the questions and answers, and we will collect them, and we will present them to the panelists. We're not going to allow interventions as such from all of you, which is a shame, but then we're going to have too many technical difficulties, we think, with all the translation and everything. So we will make our best to get our, our questions and comments and transfer them here in the webinar. So first I want to, and also about me, I'm actually a member of the University Pompeu Fabra, and I'm actually a member of Research and Degrowth, trying to link all this extractivism with the paradigm of degrowth and the fact that we need to stop growing, to stop all this push for extractivism. And but more important is introduction to our speakers. First, I want to introduce Tero Mustonen from Finland. He's lead author in the latest IPCC 6th assessment report. He's working for the Snow Change Cooperative in Finland, where he coordinates the landscape rebuilding program. So please, Tero, you have 15 minutes to tell us about what you're doing there in Finland to stop all this, to exert the right to say no.
Well, let me thank the organizers and co-panelists for allowing me to go first. I'm phoning to you from a remote community of Lieksa in Eastern Finland, and deepest apologies for having to go after this talk. But in any case, I wish to thank especially Marta and Silvia and Hannibal Rhodes for making this possible, this very timely and important event. Everybody hear me okay, or just nod? Yeah, okay, thank you. Now, I'm sure I heard it's 50 minutes that I have, so no, that's just a joke. I will give you some idea that what we are doing here in the northeastern corner of Europe. As you may know, Finland is a boreal and Arctic nation, meaning this is the cold place, or it used to be at least, before the advent of the large-scale climate change. And now, as such, the northern areas, the northern peripheries are becoming the new bonanza. So we are facing a rather large number of international mining companies that are coming into the area after rare earth metals, diamonds, and in this particular community where I'm phoning to you, uranium. And I am a leader of the village of Selkie and also work for Snow Change, which is the Pan-Arctic network of villages that are all being affected by the needs. And as I saw in the chat, one of the people was asking about computers. Each new iPhone, each new iPad, new laptop is sourced often from here. And even now, Mr. Elon Musk, with his range of Tesla vehicles, is looking to source the batteries for the electric vehicles from the Sami homeland in northwest Russia with Norilsk nickel. So all of this is to say that mining is probably the most profound land use threat that our villages are facing, both us, the Finns, and then the indigenous peoples, the Sami here. I would also include into that list the question of peat mining, which is taking place in the Boreal. Peat is a essentially the lungs of the world, much like Amazonia. They are the carbon stocktake and carbon sinks here in the north, and they are also being mined. Now, what are our mechanisms so far that have delivered on this question of how do we say no, or how do we form an orderly response to the threats at hand? So it has been said many times over the years that Finland is probably the most open country for large-scale mining due to our legislation that in some ways dates back to the reformist year of 1650s. So the mining laws in Finland are in some cases at least 100 years old, or follow the same pattern as the law from 1800s, and actually in some cases from 1600s, meaning that no community has any rights. So unlike other parts of the Arctic, for example in Canada, where the Inuit people and some of the First Nations people have land rights, or at least are on a pathway for reconciliation and a dialogue, including mining companies, oil companies, and pipeline companies, Finland and Russia stand alone in the Arctic in the sense that there are no land rights. And we also suffer from something that the Germans called Finlandisierung back in the Cold War, which meant that the Finnish national politics, foreign policy, and natural resources politics were closely aligned with Moscow, meaning that our civil society is severely and has been historically severely underdeveloped. All of these factors contribute to the fact that communities are facing, just like globally, very profound time. You may think of the public image of Finland or Sweden with our wonderful clean waters, female prime ministers, PISA tests that number beyond the charts, public schools, public universities, and so on. And while there are aspects of those narratives that are true, there's also a downside to the European North. And it comes first and foremost in the context of being the untapped or underutilized, but very, very rich natural resources area. My colleague is sleeping in the background, snoring after a hard day at work in the fish camp. So that's why that's the soundtrack that some of you might hear. Please excuse Jari for doing that. When large-scale mining has started to arrive into those villages where no change is working, I'll give you just a few points of how we have tried in an orderly manner respond to the threats. The first realization that we have had is that the national process of licensing and commenting on mining lots and zoning is very ineffective. None of it has stopped a single mine in Finland. Therefore, our successful strategic view has been to contact the CEOs and the head offices of international mining companies directly. And in our village council meetings, for example, in Selkie or in here in Eno and Lieksa area, we have decided that no matter what we do, let's first inform the CEO and the board of the kind of area where they are working. Now, all of you who are joining in from the European lands and from the cradles of civilization for Europe, please bear in mind that in our remote northern villages, we don't have the large churches or Colosseum or a long written history. In fact, our rock art and oral histories constitute the thousands of years of history, as well as the traditional land uses, such as the one to do with fishing that tired Jari in the background. So these constitute our cultural heritage of UNESCO level. These are our histories, but they are mostly unwritten. Or then the written versions of communal history and aspects of cultural heritage are stigmatized and centralized to Helsinki, our capital. So one of the first things we have done over the years when we are resisting and rebuilding is to inform mining companies, authorities, and parties what kind of a land exists here. The last natural sinks, the last natural wilderness areas, waters that you can still drink if they are not wrecked by mining or forestry or something else. And therefore, all of our sites are servicing all of Europe. A lot of your birds come here on their summer journey to be roosting or nesting, and then they fly back, as they do right now, back to Europe and Northern Africa. So the preservation of the northern ecosystems, such as the Boreal, Finnish, and Sami areas, services all of humankind. And therefore, we have successfully driven away two Australian mining companies, Western Areas Limited, and then a subsidiary called Finnaust Mining in 2013, when we made the orderly call and communications with Australia and informed them of the kind of way of life, whether it's reindeer herding, fisheries, hunting, or whatever the case, that's still here as a post-ice age land use. So that's the kind of direct communications that we have succeeded on. And that's also realizing many of our community rights. People are feeling more proud when they are asked about their family history. Where have you been fishing? How will mining affect you? What are the spawning areas of salmonid species? How can we inform the global audiences, not just mining companies, but others, about this preserved, intact, or semi-intact landscapes? Now, the second point that I want to bring into this prestigious forum in my short time, and hopefully if there is some urgent or burning questions, I'm happy to take them before I have to go, has to do with the rebuilding. When mining has happened, mainly peat mining, and in some cases some other extractive, we have launched with the communities, both indigenous and traditional, something called landscape rewilding. We have systematically purchased landscape-wide sites and used traditional knowledge, which is still preserved in the villages, and science to nurture these sites back into health. Let me be clear. We don't expect them or portray them to be post-ice age primal forests or marsh mires, but they are having a third life. And in some cases, we have seen astounding comebacks for biodiversity on post-mining sites when the community has taken charge of restoration and rewilding. I'll give you a critical indicator. On one of our sites, at the time of the mining, it used to be two species of birds that were visiting. And now on that site, after rewilding work, we are up to 195 bird species, many of them nesting, including extremely rare wading birds such as long-billed dew-witcher, Terek sandpiper, and many other critically endangered bird species and mammals that have found a new home and safe haven through the work that our community people and leaders have done. So it's not only that how do we say no and how do we resist and how do we maintain these pulses of life that communities are in their socio-ecological systems, and how do the women, as often being the safeguarding rangers and caretakers of their homelands, are kept safe? How do we address multinational huge corporations? All of that, of course, takes what all of you have: courage, vision, standing up when nobody else is doing that, and so on and so on. But please recall that here in the north, in the remote communities, we don't have the access. We don't have the access to London or even Helsinki often. We don't have the phone line to a minister or something like that. And therefore we have to find other mechanisms. And sometimes even the international standards like FPIC, Aquacon, and land use studies fail. That's why I have found out that sometimes a direct phone call to the CEO works. And it can be a polite one saying, look, we understand that mining happens, but do you know where you are planning your multi-billion operations to happen? It is some of the last pristine wilderness in Europe, and it's servicing both climate change or climate through the massive northern carbon sinks that we are rebuilding and keeping, and it's servicing European level biodiversity through the European flyway of birds and other migratory animals. And that's an uneven battle. There will be early victories and tremendous losses. Not all will be restored. Not all will be won over. We will lose tremendous assets, villages, and people. Many people will die, and they will die of despair, or they will die in underhanded ways from alcoholism, abuse, and other mechanisms that has been called slow violence by scholars, because they have to face an unknown future with no rights and no guarantees. But let me tell you that there are still villages standing against that wave. And we believe that we are the guardians of this century, because what's driving us internally is our traditional knowledge. And inside that traditional knowledge, there's a bright burning flame of a mind where land, waters, and human mind are all connected. And that's why it's such a profound time. It's not only to resist, but we also have to talk about rebuilding, governing for the century in alternative ways, rebuilding those lost lands and reclaiming them for safety. And maybe, just maybe, we will have a fighting chance. Thank you very much for your attention. And if the chair allows, maybe I can take a few questions, or if not, I'll be then servicing online, and afterwards you can email us at Snow Change and our staff will respond, or myself. And let me give you 1 second of advertisement. If you go to the Snow Change website, there's a brand new Australian high-end SBS documentary about our mining and rewilding and restoration program. So that's freely available on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tero. So don't go. I understand your proposal is to resist through rebuilding. I'm gonna take the opportunity that you're here because you have to leave, to maybe, if you can, and also because you haven't finished your time, if you can explain a bit more which strategies has you or your community or the groups that have been in Finland used to exert the right to say no. For example, I mean, you said you've successfully driven away three projects, not Australian companies. Which were the strategies that you used?
Et donc, quelles sont les stratégies qu'ils utilisent à part le fait de parler avec les CEO des entreprises?
Estrategias que son útiles para relacionarse con estas compañías, y en ese sentido es el derecho a decir no una de ellas. Por favor, elabora cuáles estrategias has usado.
Pour lutter contre la l'extraction minière localement en Finlande.
That's usually the case. But let me return to this.
Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. Well, what were our strategic actions? Has to do with that direct line of communication. That also worked with the Irish mining company called Karelian Diamonds. I was involved in a defense of Sami village of Utsjoki in 2014. That was going to be destroying the largest intact wilderness area of Europe. But we won that fight. So one of the early strategic ideas is that don't trust your national legislation. It's outdated. It's a hard thing to say, and of course you have to play that game. You have to fill complaints, you have to meet with the ministers, you have to meet with this and that people. But the mining companies are like hydra, meaning that they are extremely clever, decentralized, and they are operational in multiple theaters at the same time. They usually go also to those countries like Australia, Finland, Russia, Canada, and other, Brazil, South Africa, where the legislation is the weakest. And that's why when you try to make a strategic choice what to do, you have to very carefully see what is the exact company. Do they actually have any guidelines on ethics, on community engagement, sustainability, and so on? One of the hardest things to do is our own Finnish mining companies and Russian companies, because they don't have to adhere and they don't follow any international standards. So direct communications with the head office has been one that has worked in some cases. Secondly, what I often call making unknown history or invisible history more visible. That's what I was talking about earlier with the oral histories and traditional culture and us not having those monuments on the landscape. What looks like empty space is actually filled with human histories for hundreds and hundreds of years. So sometimes you have to create maps, basic maps informing how the villages are doing and what they are doing, and then you take them to a range of forums, including with the company or public forums, media, research, and so on. And of course, unity. We have to find mechanisms in the villages to be agreeing what are we doing. And of course, with the splintering impact of social media, which may bring also good advantages, but I'm not on the Facebooks, I'm not on the Twitter or Instagram, simply because I don't believe in that. I'm still too back old-fashioned fishing guy here in some place in Northern Europe that I don't believe in that world. But I have seen its devastating impact on community life when opinions are, or let me say it this way, our unity is lost because the people are immersed too much in their social medias. They think that clicking on a petition will help. It may help, but the primary action often is elsewhere. And thirdly, maybe the most important strategic idea is that we have to think we will survive. We have a place here. This century and the future has not been set. And the comeback through the rewilding work that we are doing, for example, Hal has been visiting many of our sites, is the living testimony to the story of Earth that's far removed from the headlines of Trumps and all these climate change apocalyptic views. So those are the kind of drivers of strategic thought that I think we have. You have to engage in a very rigorous and fearless communications and inform all parties, politicians, mining company, or scientists, or whatever the case. Secondly, you have to put in place mechanisms like mapping videos, participatory videos, or others to bring those invisible human histories into light. Say that this is a homeland, this is a living landscape, these are the people or ecosystems that are fully still there, and why don't you go away or think otherwise what you are doing. And lastly, what's often not pronounced and said out loud, I'll stop here, is that what are we to do about that future? How do we govern in a profound moment on the planet? And that's why the rewilding program and offering alternatives, which are restoring, nurturing back, maintaining traditional livelihoods, women's knowledges, women's rights, youth rights, and putting elders back front and center for their wisdom is very attractive one. Because we don't have a lot of choices here in the bush. You know, we can't go out to the cafe latte bar. We don't have a third mechanism to go to university as such, even though of course many young people can do that in Finland, but if you think of the village level. So the land, the kind of things we are doing on the land and safeguarding those ecosystems is our culture, is our way of life, food security, and how do we adapt to the tremendous 6 mean temperature degree change for the climate that's wrecking the northern part of the planet. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I think that are part of our strategic view.
Thank you, Tero. It's great hearing you also, all your visions and your connections to land and all this idea of rewilding. Thank you for bringing this side of Europe still connected to the land, to the people, to the customs, the history, and to bring this alive. We'll move to our next panelist, Roxana Penthea Bradatan from Romania. She's a founding member and network coordinator of Mining Watch Romania. Mining Watch Romania was founded in 2013 as a network of organizations joining local communities in their efforts to stop destructive industrial scale mining projects. And currently they're focusing on fighting 3 main mining projects in Romania. She will tell us more about this. I'm gonna ask all questions. Let me add this before you carry on, Roxana. We're gonna select mostly those questions that relate about the right to say no. I mean, the focus of this panel is not so much to decide where mining is gonna take place, but to focus and learn about how communities are developing this concept of the right to say no. So it'd be great,
este concepto del derecho a decir que no. Entonces, Roxana, por favor, enfócate en las estrategias para decir que no.
Hola a todos, soy Roxana, en Rumanía, Transilvania. Estado en contacto con muchas comunidades rumanas que están luchando contra la minería de oro, pero
I've been an activist in such campaigns for a long time, and I had the honor to meet people.
J'ai eu l'opportunité aussi de rencontrer des personnes dans ces communautés qui luttent réellement contre ces processus d'extraction minière. Et les types de minerais dont je parle, c'est plutôt argent et or.
Roxana, is it me the only person that is here in the Spanish translation?
If you're hearing a translation, you can click on interpretation and then off, and then it will stop.
So it's me. Okay, sorry about this, Roxana.
You don't want translation.
Nous avons un petit problème avec la traduction en espagnol. Donc, la Roumanie, c'est un pays très très riche en ressources minières, ce qui s'est traduit plutôt comme une malchance.
All of them situated in the Carpathian Range, and
sobre todo todas las minas de las que hablaré están situadas en las montañas. Son algunas de las montañas, las últimas montañas son las últimas zonas donde hay cierta fauna silvestre en Europa, cada vez menos población.
But nevertheless,
también en los pueblos.
To a community, we had very wonderful stories.
Tenemos historias maravillosas de resistencia. Y la más exitosa de ellas es la de salvar a Rosia Montana. Rosia Montana es una área donde ha habido minería desde hace tiempo, una tradición también agrícola y
Early 2000, a Canadian.
Nous avons par exemple une entreprise canadienne.
I can hear you the French translation. That was sudden, but it's good.
Je sais pas ce qui se passe. I'm unable to.
Translation off. If you go to the bottom of interpretation, there's a
it's
way
off?
to say off. Apparently.
Yeah, probably I pushed something with my agenda. Sorry,
Yes, same with
sorry
me.
for doing that. So at the early 2000, the Canadian mining Gaia resources came to
En
Rocha-Montana.
2000, l'entreprise canadienne de mine
And
Una compañía canadiense vino a Rosario Montana para trabajar en el depósito de oro más grande. La gente, la comunidad ahí entendió muy pronto que la experiencia sería muy diferente, que destruiría completamente la vida de la comunidad y que el pueblo se convertiría en una enorme mina de a cielo abierto. Así que rápidamente formaron una asociación que también luego recibió a gente de todo el punto del país. De hecho, yo era una estudiante entonces y fui también a la comunidad porque oí sobre su lucha.
Ils ont commencé leurs premières protestes. Et
of course, this fight continued for 20 years, so you can imagine a lot change in time. Also, the mining company put a lot of pressure on the local community. The Tero mentioned slow violence, and I really understand this concept because I saw it happening in Rocha-Montana, where people were forced to accept eventually to accept the mine, though they knew it was wrong, because the mining company started to hire people from the community and to threaten that they will fire people if they don't agree to sell lands. So in this very stressful context, there was a group of people that really resisted the mine and said no to mining and yes to life. And their struggle became a social movement in Romania, the largest social and environmental movement that we can definitely say that it changed the country to the better. And I'm gonna share with you the screen to see Rocha-Montana, because this is the village I'm referring, and strategies, because I think it's very important. In 20 years, these people and the people that joined their fight used all the strategies in the world. I don't know, from organizing a festival to attract people in the country, from participating in public consultations, from organizing protests, from submitting comments to different procedures, like when issuing a permit, the authority needed to consult with the public, and the people sent comments. But as also Tero said, the legislation was quite weak, and most of them, the political people, the politicians in our country, were very corrupt and easily manipulated, and manipulated by the mining company, or they got all kinds of incentives to support the mine. So along these years, we needed to continuously change strategies, because we were trying one thing and the politicians were giving new permits. And I think one of the keys, the strategic keys in our fight was the fact that people from the campaign started to do strategic litigation. And it was the work of my colleagues, Stefania namely, that coordinated a group of lawyers that eventually stopped the mine. And it's really important to understand that a lot of permits, from urban plans to historical discharge certificates to other kinds of permits, were annulled in court. And this managed to stop the advancement of the mine. And meanwhile, all the public information events gathered a huge critical mass of citizens that understood that people are more important than gold. And because of this wonderful solidarity that people in Romania showed, we had the moment in 2013 when the government wanted to change the law in favor of the mining company, that people all around the country, and this is a picture from the capital city, gathered in the streets and protested against this new bill, and forced the government and the parliament to reject it. And this was what we say to be the most beautiful moment in Romania's recent history, because it's one of the few examples where people power won, and when people became more powerful than the government and managed to impose their will. And because of all these people that gathered in support of the local people in Roșia Montană, the mining project was blocked. But this didn't stop the mining company to go to Washington to ask for arbitration, to demand $4.4 billion in compensations in arbitration. You know, the ISDS system, which is very unfair to local communities and totally neglects the right to say no, because in this arbitration, which is a kind of a private process, the local community doesn't have a say, is not a part of the process that happens in the between the mining company and the state. The local community is only invited to, not even invited. The community can submit an amicus curiae, which is a 20-page letter in which they make their case. So with the help with wonderful lawyers, we managed to submit a case to the ISDS tribunal, but nevertheless, this is just seen by the tribunal as an opinion. The struggle now 20 years later is still ongoing, and we don't know for sure what the result will be. But at the same time, I want to say about building alternatives, and I think this is a point that I really need to stress out about the Adopt a House program, restoration program in Romania, in Roșia Montană. So I mentioned earlier that the village is an historical one, and since the years 2010, a very long process to enlist Roșia Montană as a UNESCO site happened, and in the late years, we convinced the government to submit the dossier at UNESCO. Then another government came and took back the dossier from UNESCO exactly the day when the UNESCO committee wanted to include Roșia Montană in UNESCO. Well, the government changed again. It was resubmitted, and now because of the pandemic, so the UNESCO evaluation is stopped. But anyway, we have high hopes that one of these days, maybe next year, Roșia Montană will be on UNESCO site, and the restoration program that you see here is has the goal to bring back to life the houses that are in ruin and that need urgent intervention. And we see the future of Roșia Montană in tourism. A lot of Romanians and people from abroad come to visit the village, and we know that this would be a very good source of income for the people there. This is one of the cases. Another one I want to tell you about is the Certej mine. The Certej mine, it looks like that. It's another wonderful valley in the Apuseni Mountains, and it's another project. This one belongs to Eldorado Gold. It's also a Canadian company that has operations in Greece and Turkey. It is a major player in the world for gold producing, and it has plans to exploit all the area that you see in the picture and much more than the first phase of a project that would cover 450 hectares. They would also use cyanide in the process, and here it's a different story from Roșia Montană in the sense that they have been active here also from the beginning of 2000, but they had a different strategy. and they did everything very quietly, and we only found out about their plans and how advanced they were when in 2012 they got an environmental permit from the Romanian authorities. So this, I think, the Certej mine was in fact the reason why Mining Watch Network was created, because otherwise we all felt that we are part of the Save Roșia Montana campaign, when we realized that other mining projects are on the verge to start. So we started a fight here. We've been discussing also with the community. The problem is that here in Certej, the company has been with the people for 13 years and managed to convince them that they were gonna do a very small mining project that won't harm anyone and that they will get a lot of money to the community, which is a pity, because in fact, if you consult the documents that the mining company shares with the investors, the numbers are very small in terms of jobs and a lot of course, of income for the mining company. Nevertheless, we managed to join forces with some people in the community, and we went again to court. Strategic litigation was again our main strategy, and now we can say this summer we had a very good success in court. We managed to stop the urban plans of the mine and therefore to block the mine for the moment. This doesn't mean that the mine is forever and ever stopped. This just means that they are blocked for the moment, and probably they need to redo a process that took them more than 10 years. As we've seen in Roșia Montana, this kind of companies don't leave easily. I know that Tero has different experiences in Finland, and I'm happy for them. For us, it was totally different. So they got here in the early 2000s and they never left. And it only depended, we needed very strong communities or people involved in the fight to resist their plans, because they have been seeing these places as investments, long-term investments. And another mine that we are trying to stop is here in the Rovina village. And what is different from the other mines is that here we don't have a village on top of the mine. And it's at the very beginning, they got their permit to mine 2 years ago, and they are at the feasibility study. So what we've faced as challenges is the fact that the Romanian authorities were very corrupt and very weak and always favored the mining companies. They never looked critically at the mining projects, which in fact meant that they offered permits without any analysis. And even when we managed as a community or a society to stop some very toxic projects, the authorities never learned anything. So a few years ago, Romania designed a new mining strategy, and of course we participated so that we improved this strategy and also include the right to say no and many other ideas, and they never took into considerations our proposals. So we have a new mining strategy that is as bad as this one, as before. And another very big challenge is the fact that though we are, for example, Certej is a Natura 2000 site, and it doesn't really matter. You can have mining in Natura 2000 sites. So this protection is just on paper, is not a real protection for the sites in Europe, in Romania, everywhere. I think, I don't know if I'm at the end of my presentation, but
yes,
this
Roxana,
is...
you should be closing, yes.
Yeah, so I think this is what I wanted to share with you for the moment. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Roshana. That was very interesting, and you did point to a lot of good strategies that obviously you have a lot of experience in Romania. I'm gonna swiftly move to Sonia Hurtado. Unfortunately, we couldn't have our speaker from No Tap movement in Italy. They couldn't participate, but fortunately we have a representative from the platform Save the Mountain of Cáceres in Spain. Sonia, thank you for joining us with such short notice. Sonia has been part of this platform since it was created 3 years ago. And the platform was created, that she will explain us in a moment, to stop a lithium mine that is to be located 2 kilometers from the city of Cáceres, no? So she's certainly part of one of the most impressive, at least to my knowledge, social movements here in Spain. They have an amazing coordination there, and they help in many other movements. And we're really happy to have you here, Sonia.
Well, thank you all to the all organizers. Excuse me for my English. I am very nervous doing. Well,
no worries. I always say English is our is the language we communicate with. We don't need to be perfect speakers.
Thank you, Marta, very much. Well, I'm Sonia. I'm natural from Cáceres. It is a village located in the southwest of Spain, in the border to Portugal, Portuguese border. And well, this village has around 100,000 population, and our city is in the basis of a mountain, La Montaña. All a system of little mountains, really, in the middle of a plain land. And well, the motivations to create this platform in Cáceres was in August 2017, 3 years ago only. We are very, very young. When many machines like bulldozers, etc., came into the valley of Valdeflores. I am going to show you, sorry, the picture. No, esto no es. Excuse me. Bueno. So that's the can you see the picture?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, so that's the mountain of Cáceres, and Cáceres.
You need to make it bigger.
Bigger.
We see many pictures, but we don't see.
Ah, okay.
But we see them in small.
That's okay now?
No.
No.
For me.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Technicalities. Ah, there we go. Ah, we had it.
Yes.
There we go. Yes. Oops, not again.
Not again.
We had it for a moment and then it went.
No.
No.
I don't know how to come again. Okay.
We can see the different pictures right now.
Well, I don't know. What to do now.
Maybe just tell us about the different strategies and if you can. Yeah, now we have Sylvia's screen starting to share your photos, so you can carry on, Sonia.
Okay. So excuse me, 3 years ago, some machines came into the valley of Valdeflores. Nobody knew about anything, either neighborhoods or Vale. And so this alert, everybody, we get a meeting with many associations in the village. This valley is very close to the sanctuary of the patron saint La Montaña, and it's true that well, we get very alarmed because we didn't know anything about this project, and so we decide to organize and to investigate to know what information did the Mary got, and well, that's why we decided to organize. At the beginning, we got a very big support from another Spanish platforms who provide us information about the actions we had to take. That was very important for us. Because well, the machines were there and we didn't know what was all about. And so we organized in many work groups, and our first logo was we cannot defend what we don't know. So it was very difficult to read some information about what does it mean an open-pit mine of lithium next to our village, because there is no reference in the world about that. The only one maybe is Cerro de Pasco in Peru, which is in its origin a mine workers city, but the mine has has removed the city to take place herself, and well, once we had all the information of the project, we knew that the Mary had given so many permissions for those machines to come in, but they were committing several illegalities because well, they were cutting trees and opening paths and everything, and without permission of the proprietaries of the lands, and the permissions were not correct. We were very lucky because we had also the support of a lawyer association related to the environmental protection, and that was very important for us because we could react very fast in the legal sense and in the administrative sense, and by other way, we began to mobilize all the population, providing of the information related to the project. In 6 months, we organized more than 15 informative meetings in every neighborhood. It was very, wow, very intensive. For us, it has always been very important to give rigorous information, to show exactly what's the project about, explaining also what does an open-pit mine mean, and well, to know other references in the world. Also to know the irreparable consequences to our health, to the enormous demand of water, and the devastation for our environment. Also, we organize cultural activities like talks with biologists, geologists, doctors in medicines, people from other platforms, and we also organize many hikes in the environment of Valdeflores, of this valley, always in our purpose to know the wildlife and where the place where we live. In this valley, there are some neighborhoods, but they are also economic activities like farms and agriculture, and we also put this in value because well, it's very important to know what this mine is going to destroy. So we involved a lot of associations from all the possible areas in our city, cultural associations, neighborhood associations, sportives, business, etc. It was very important for us to make know everybody what was happening. And well, we began to receive many signals that we were sensibilizing the population because many collectives and associations began to organize by their own activities to make conscience about the problematic. So that was great also for us because well, all our purpose was getting its place. In these 3 years, we organized several mobilizations. Well, a lot of them. One of the more surprising for us was when we organized a solidarity hike at the valley. We expected around 200 people, and there were 600 people. That was enormous for us, for everybody. And in our first protest march, there were 3,000 people. That was one of the most crowded marches in our city history also. And also for the allegations and claims to the project, we reached a big mobilization also. Okay, I would like to show you a video to locate the project. It is a very big project. I don't know if I will be able to do it. Okay.
So if you're having difficulties, I can also share it for you. Just
I share it in the
Yes,
chat.
please, Sylvia, if you can do it. I just share it to you in the chat.
1 second. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we don't hear volume.
No?
No.
Can you hear now?
No.
No.
try. 1 second, please. Okay.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia, for your participation. That was it's a good video you have there. So we're going to move on into our next speaker. It's Richard Solly, who has been working for the past 30 years in support of indigenous and other land-based communities opposing mining multinationals. He's the coordinator of the London Mining Network since its launch in 2007. So Richard is going to give us more vision of what we can do here in the North to aid and help communities in their struggles, not affected by companies, mainly based in the North, like US, Canadian, and European companies, and pushed by our depredatory extractivism and consumerism. So thank you, Richard, for giving us your vision of what we can do. Thank you.
Okay, well, specifically, I'm going to talk about what we in London do. And we work specifically on companies linked to London. And I'm going to say something about London Mining Network and the link with the right to say no to mining. We were founded in 2007 as an alliance of organisations concerned about the impacts of mining companies funded from London, which is one of the two most important centres of mining finance, along with Toronto in Canada. The members of our alliance are very different from each other in all manner of ways, but what united us was the conviction that communities living on the land should have the right to decide what happens on their land. In 2007, we agreed a statement of purpose, which includes, among others, the two following points. Ensure that mining projects not be allowed to proceed without recognition of land title for mining affected communities, and ensure that mining projects not be allowed to proceed without demonstrable public acceptance by those directly affected by them, and in the case of Indigenous peoples, without recognition of their legal right to free, prior, informed consent. This formulation, of course, implies the right of communities to say no to mining. We singled out indigenous peoples because they had already achieved recognition of rights which later in 2007 were internationally agreed in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And we didn't want to do anything which would appear to undermine the distinctiveness of those rights. But it was clear from the beginning that our aspiration was to support, to the extent that we practically could, any land-based community opposing proposed London-financed mining projects on their land. No community should be sacrificed for the short-term interests of corporate shareholders, national elites, or imperialist and neo-colonial states. The forms of solidarity we offer are much the same whether a community is struggling to prevent a mining project from starting or trying to get justice for damage done by existing mining projects. And we include at times solidarity with mining workers struggling for justice from London-linked mining companies. A good example of the kind of activity we organise when not prevented by COVID-19 is the speaker tour. Each year we bring representatives of mining affected communities to London around the time of one or other of the major mining company shareholder meetings. We enable them to attend the shareholder meeting itself and make sure that their community's demands are made clear to the board in front of those shareholders. If they request it, we also arrange meetings with company management. But we also arrange for them to speak at meetings with parliamentarians, institutional investors, interested NGOs, journalists, students, and other members of the public, not only in London, but in other parts of the country. We've sometimes succeeded in getting coverage of their concerns in major national media, though that's a struggle. It's been really good taking our visitors to meet members of mining affected communities in England and Scotland, because they've enjoyed sharing experiences of struggle against the companies. I remember especially taking Indonesian colleagues to meet young activists in southern Scotland in 2010. The activists were occupying a wood which was under threat from open cast coal mining. We sat under the trees in the cold rain, and the Scottish activists were amazed to learn of the colossal size of Indonesian open cast mines, while Indonesian colleagues were surprised that this land occupation was occurring at all without a realistic threat of the occupiers being shot dead by the military. Through the year, we try to bring communities' voices to the attention of the public in the UK through our website, social media, email newsletters and publications. We conduct research, publish articles and reports, and issue briefings for institutional investors. We lobby members of the British and European Parliaments, investors and the United Nations to tighten regulation of mine waste disposal. We produce educational materials and hold educational events. We carry out online campaigns and street activities such as demonstrations, pickets and vigils in support of mining affected communities. The urgency of establishing an internationally recognised right to say no to mining is even greater as the pressure builds for a huge expansion in the mining of minerals used in the transition away from fossil fuels. We believe it is crucial that all fossil fuels are phased out very quickly to avoid climate catastrophe. But this must not be at the expense of communities and ecosystems being damaged by an increase in the mining of uranium, lithium, copper, nickel, cobalt, bauxite, or any other mineral. We need to work towards a post-extractivist future where the global economy and human society do not rely on the extraction of ever greater quantities of minerals and the generation of ever greater quantities of waste. This is just another form of collective ecological suicide. Although the key role in the struggle is the resistance of communities themselves, the achievement of international recognition of the right of communities to say no to mining in their territory would be a crucial tool in supporting that resistance and stimulating the move to that hoped for post-extractivist future. And that's it.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for being so succinct. Excellent. We have numerous questions of different types. Because I don't want to extend too much the talk, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you some of the questions to all the panelists, and then we're going to do a last round where you can pick and choose which question you want to answer, okay? And then we also will be fair to the different questions. I have a couple that...
There's one question. Yes. I feel that I received the comments from our interpreters that some of Richard's speech was a little bit too fast.
Okay.
Can you please double check that everything was translated?
How do I do that?
Just you're listening to the Spanish interpreters.
So I listen now to the Spanish interpreters.
Yeah. Angelica, is everything all right with the interpretation for Richard?
I was unable to. I don't. Should I answer or?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I lost a couple of lines, unfortunately, because it was very quick. But I couldn't say which one.
I can ask him to repeat the last part of his speech. Very good. Yeah, Richard, thank you.
Or if you like, I could put the text of it in the chat box to panelists. Would that be easier?
That's also an option, of course. Yeah. It won't be translated
to everyone. Maybe just to everyone, no? And then
I will put the whole thing in the chat box. I'm so sorry. I was trying to ensure that I didn't go over my my legitimate time.
Thank you very much.
Hold on a minute. Doesn't want to take too much of it in one go, so I'll have to do it paragraph by paragraph.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
In the meantime, if that's okay with you, I will carry on with the questions. We have a couple of questions from the organizing team that we will you to also consider, which is how would you define the right to say no in your context? And this links to another question that was posed right at the beginning. Why call it right to say no, and why not call it the free, prior, and informed consent? That it's a different process that's been going on for a while, and many communities have been striving for it. And what could be done to materially advance the right to say no in Europe? Then another question is how to deal with those who wanted mining due to jobs or income. So did communities stay firm in your case? There's another question from Facebook. It says, did the political authorities and mining companies provide support for the recovery of concerned sites? And here's another one. It happens that after a year of dialogue between the company and local communities, the project is accepted. But at the point, someone outside the local community comes and starts a movement against the project the local community was favorable to. Is this fair? They say. And then we have, when dealing with
maybe that's enough, Marta. My head's already spinning. I don't know about panelists. We've got a couple more that we could ask in a second round.
Okay, you're gonna 2 rounds. Okay, go for it then. If you want, Roshana, you can be first because I think we don't have Tero here.
About the right to say no. So I think it's really, really vital that in a community, all the voices are heard when a mining company comes with a plan. And what happens usually is that the people that say no, and it's their right to say no, are usually abused either by the mining company or by the authorities to shut up. And this is something we don't talk about at the European level. And when we speak about sourcing metals in Europe, we think that we have the governance and we have the laws to do it responsibly. And I don't think I have a 20 years experience in fighting opposing gold mining. And I know that this is not true. And in fact, what happens is that local communities that own the land are pushed into selling, are pushed into accepting, are pushed into making room for the so-called development. And I don't believe that mining into the ground is the solution. I believe in urban mining. And of course, some professions will kind of disappear, like geologists in mining. And this is a fact that we kind of need to accept. So I think our right to say no is the right to think of the future of our communities, the future of how the technology might develop if we are not so much obsessed with mining into the ground. And I think we have the responsibility as affected communities to be loud in our, and strong in what we believe, and to make others also see our point of view. And I think this is the right to say no. And if it's not loved or accepted by all the society, it's of course, yeah, it's fair in a way, because I see mining companies and professional associations joining and uniting in different projects and showing how everything is smooth and okay, and having all the financial resources to do PR work. I don't see the same resources or capacities among simple people that really just want to be left alone. And I don't see the same resources put into urban mining. And honestly, I would want to see more from the European Commission on urban mining and the progress that is made and the policies that are made. And I really wanted to make this point because I've seen many of the comments on the chat, and I don't consider that the people there are listening to communities. And I've seen this for many years. And it's time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshana. Sonia, you want to respond to? You have a comment about how do you find the right to say no in your context? Or Sonia? I cannot hear you, Sonia. Turn off your mute.
Yes. In our context, we try to exercise our right to say no to the municipal government. We could stop it there when the machines enter by the legal way. And we talk with all the politician groups in the mairie also to know which was exactly their position. At first, the mayoress was for the mine. After seeing all the mobilizations, she changed her mind and she was against the project. The mayor, the actual mayor, is against the mine. And well, the regional government, which is the representation of the national government, says that it is our municipality who has the last word. If we don't want, it won't be done, but if we say yes, it will be done. By now, we are at the no. But the regional government isn't clear about that, and that's why we also give our petitions to the European Commission, and now they are studying them. So, well, that's what we are doing now. We try to resist and to go where the decisions are taken. With all the politics, it is very difficult, but we are on the way to stop it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sonia. Richard, any comments about the questions posed?
Yes, I'm not speaking from a community facing mining, but from the perspective of people working in solidarity with those communities. And there's a problem, of course, with defining what's meant by community and determining whether a community is saying no. In some cases, it's really clear. In some parts of Latin America, there has been established the right of local municipalities to hold referenda about large-scale development projects. And where these have been held, they've often come up with majorities of 98 or 99% against mining. So it's really clear that those communities are saying no to mining. But as some of the questioners have suggested, there is often division in a community because some people may feel that they have something to gain through a mining project going ahead. We are certainly aware of that, but we are also aware of the fact that those who want the mining project to go ahead have on their side the mining company with all its resources, the government of their country, often the military, and intimidation is often used against those who are against the mine rather than against those who are in favour of the mine. So there's a great imbalance of power. There's often also a great lack of information, and it's been interesting to see how the provision of information has been one of the key things that our speakers have talked about in their struggles to reject mining, making people aware of what it would actually mean. So we, in our solidarity work, would certainly not be working against mining in a community where everybody wanted it. We wouldn't be asked to be part of that struggle. So, and there's also sometimes a lack of clarity about who is part of a community and who is not. So in the case of the mining project that I've worked on most, the Cerrejón coal mine in Colombia, there's a dispute in one of the communities between community members and the mining company about who is a legitimate member of that community and therefore who has a right to express an opinion. It's difficult thousands of miles away to adjudicate that, but the division was not there before the mining project was proposed. And well, not proposed, it was imposed. It was imposed at the point of a gun in that case.
Sorry, I was listening to the Spanish translation, trying to see if you were following.
I hope I was sufficiently slow.
I think you were. I think you were. Sorry, I think you were. Thank you for this. I think indeed you point to a very interesting point on who is the community, in how you enact the right to say no, so that you have actually, who has the right to say no in a certain project. Sorry, I guess I wanted to jump in and start talking, but I'm the facilitator today. So I'm gonna have 2 more questions. And this is going to be the last round. So I'm going to read the questions and then we do a last round and then we close because we already have passed. So what role do alternative forms of community livelihood have in terms of how communities respond to or resist mining projects? So what is the role of alternative forms of community livelihoods in these resistance movements? There's also a question that's been appearing, it's appearing a couple of times, no? So they want to know about the idea that rejection extraction in Europe or the USA can be understood by the industry as an encouragement or justification for more extraction in the global south. So for example, we reject lithium here, extraction here, but we obviously, extraction is carrying on in Chile and other countries, no? So the right to say no in Europe has this risk. So how do we deal with that? Roshana, I don't know if you want to start again.
So, well, we've been in contact with groups in South America, and I've seen that our struggles are so similar, and the things that our communities wish and hope for, and we also put our best to stop mining as our partners do in Latin America. So we haven't seen this global fight as if we win, they lose, or the other way around. If they win, we're gonna lose. So I think our struggles make the fight stronger, and with more examples in different parts of the world, no matter if it's Europe or, I don't know, Asia, I think people become stronger in voicing their concerns. And this is a learning I got from sharing experiences and knowledge with other people fighting in El Salvador, fighting in Peru, fighting in Brazil. So I would not create this idea. I'm not in support of the idea that if mining is stopped in Europe, essentially it will be allowed or allowed by the communities in other parts of the world.
Thank you. Sonia, you want to add something?
I think I'm good.
Thank you, Roshana.
Yes, well, I think about that, I think that we have to change also the idea of the energetic transition and all these politics, because extractivism isn't good anywhere, and we have to raise this idea that it is still extractivism and it is green capitalism, and we have nothing to do about that. And we have to be all together to make sense and, well, to look for the way to do it.
Thank you, Sonia. Richard, you want to add something?
Yes, on livelihoods, two examples, both connected with Latin America. The Cerrejón coal mine that I mentioned earlier brought some livelihoods in mine work, and indeed drew people into the area to take those jobs. It destroyed work in small-scale agriculture and has reoriented the provincial economy in such a way that it has destroyed food security, and there are now young indigenous people dying of starvation. Just across the border in Venezuela, a British company some years ago, this was 2002 when I was visiting, was planning to expand coal mine production in the area, and to do this it was going to build a coal export port, and it was boasting about the 400 jobs that this would create. And I was told by local people that it would destroy 36,000 jobs in local inshore fishing. So the promise of jobs that mining makes can be I was somewhat distracted by your gesture there, Marta.
Sorry, just speak slowly.
Okay. Goodness, compared to Latin American friends, I always speak so slowly. I didn't realize I was speaking quickly. Yes, the promise of mining to create jobs is often an illusion when it's taken in balance with the jobs that it destroys. The second question about whether there is tension between stopping mining in Europe and North America and stimulating it in the global south. This is why the movement to establish a right to say no to mining is an international movement. That's why we want to get an internationally recognized right to say no to mining, so that it will benefit people in whatever part of the world they are, and so there's no competition between communities in the global north and communities in the global south.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard, for addressing those two questions. I think we're reaching the end of the webinar. We're gonna have Hal Rhodes, who's been collecting taking notes on the webinar on the main strategies, challenges, and facing communities wanting to exert the right to say no. So I think he's going to give us a summary before we close. Thank you, Hal.
So before we move to Hal, I just want to make a remark and remind everyone that the right to say no. Sorry, it's fine. And thank you to the panelists and all the participants on the chat. It has been a very lively discussion and very interesting. I just want to make a reminder before Hal goes on the final remarks. The right to say no is not a campaign against mining, it's against extractive industries. It so happened that in the examples in Europe, we had cases of mining, but this is a campaign that goes beyond into saying no to a mindset of extractivism, an economy that is based on the premise that the planet has unlimited resources for our use and that human development is the primary objective of evolution, when it is not. We are just one piece of what planet Earth, or the biodiversity of planet Earth, and that means that we have to rethink the full relationship between human and nature and not place human development at the center. So the right to say no is about mining, but it's also about an economic model that is based on extractivism. It's about also large-scale agriculture. It's about patriarchy. It's about capitalism in the large sense. So just to put a frame into how broad this campaign is at this point, and how important it is now that we have these conversations both at regional and global level to try to achieve a co-creative process of a campaign that is structured and that can put together under this umbrella all the different phases in which we are in the communities are resisting extractivism. So just with that, thank you again, and Hal, please go ahead and close the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, all that is left to be done is to close it, because I think you just gave a pretty awesome summary there. So I won't go back over all ground. The webinar will be available on YouTube, and we'll share it around to people who registered, and also through the various social media channels, Yes to Life, No to Mining, People's Dialogue, and elsewhere. So if you want to catch up on anything from this or share it, we definitely encourage you to do that. I'll thank everybody for a spirited debate in the comments, and also all of the speakers for taking the time to share their stories with us. It's really important, I think, to understand that at this point we're trying to understand ourselves, all of the pluralities that exist within the right to say no. Communities one way or another are campaigning and asserting this right and their self-determination anyway. So the purpose of this webinar was to understand the many different ways in which that's happened, from strategic litigation in the Romanian context to mass mobilizations in Cáceres, again, and tours on the mountain, which I thought was a very beautiful idea, to a direct and finish approach, which Tero told us about, and the importance of taking back and reclaiming lands and showing what's possible when they're turned to a reproductive use rather than an extractive use. And finally, the critical need for solidarity and to not be shackled by imagined borders, whilst also being respectful of the different contexts and threats that people face depending on where they live. So I think there's been so much rich discussion and great presentations in this. So I'll say thank you very much to all our speakers. Thanks to Sylvia and Marta for guiding us through. Thanks also to our excellent interpreters and to everybody who tuned in. Really appreciate you coming and sharing with us as far as a webinar makes that possible. So yeah, I think that closes it up, and Sylvia, I'll hand back over to you so that you can send us all packing.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you, everyone. I think there isn't much to say, so have a good evening, everyone. And thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you in the next webinars and joining the campaign on the right to say no.